Greetings, it is I, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue my discussion on D20 Modern, the modern take on the 3rd edition of Dungeons & Dragons. We last left off, we've been talking about arcane spells. Let's finish up with them today. Alright, so, the fact is, arcane spells are so complex and intricate, you're not going to be able to memorize them. There is no way that you'll be able to memorize all the different spells that you're going to be casting. This is where an important component of arcane spellcasters comes in, the Spellbook. A Spellbook allows you to write down everything about these spells that you don't have to memorize, and therefore, once you need to prepare your spells, open it up, look in there, get them ready. It's a shortcut, if you will, that you don't have to use as much of your brain power to get the spells prepared. It is an advantage that you have. Now, there is a big fact here that the original spellbooks that most arcane spellcasters use are these big, clunky tomes, heavy bound. That's a traditional spellbook. But we're in the modern age. Spellbooks don't look like this around as much anymore. You can still find the big clunky books that people will just pile up. But in this modern age, guess what we have now? Electronics. You could have your spellbook on a computer. You could have it on a PDA. You could have it on a cell phone. You just have to copy the information that would be into the spellbook into a file, and then you could put it on here. It's not as simple as typing it up, which I'll explain why. The reason for that by the end of today's episode, but just know that you can copy it in here, and it has some advantages and disadvantages. Big advantage, I can easily copy the file. I could have my spellbook on my phone, I could have it on a tablet, I could have it on a computer, a lot of different copies of it. I can back it up. I could have an SD card or some other kind of external memory where I've got a copy of my spellbook on it. I can also protect it. I could have passwords, I could have security protection on my computer or my phone to protect it, but there's where some of the disadvantages come in. That protection's not infallible. Hackers could get in and mess around with your spellbook, or do something to destroy it, get rid of your files. The other big thing here, of course, is you're bound to the electronics. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean by, if I need to memorize my spells, and I have my spellbook in front of me, I can always pick it up, open it, and read it. As fine as that. If it's on a computer, a phone, or some other device, guess what? What happens when I run out of power? Oh, I can't access my spellbook now. So as much as I might be able to lose my spellbook or lose my phone with my spellbook on it, those can happen. You can lose the book. If I don't have power, I can't use the spellbook on here. I can't memorize it. I have a reliance to the electronic device that I'm making it, which can be a big disadvantage. There's where the disadvantage to this entire thing comes. Now your mage, over the course of their career, will learn new arcane spells, and each time you will learn one, you will copy it into your spellbook to expand your repertoire of spells you know. There are a number of ways that you learn new spells. The first and largest one is, of course, leveling. As I gain experience, as I dive deeper into my study of arcane lore and knowledge, I gain more spells. In simplest of game terms, every time I level, I learn 2 new spells. And those 2 new spells, I can copy into my spellbook. Bam! Guess what? I got 2 new spells ready and rearing to cast. These do have to be of a spell, of a level I can cast. That is the only restriction here. If I can only cast up to 3rd level spells right now, I can only learn 3rd, 2nd, 1st level spells. That's it. I can only learn 3rd or below. Now, the other way I would possibly learn a spell is from another source. In this case, it will either be a magic scroll or another spellcaster's spellbook. Now, this isn't necessarily the easiest thing to do. Once I have this source, I have to study it for a day. At the end of that day, I make a spellcraft check, DC 15 plus the spell level, for the spell I'm attempting to learn and copy. That means for each time I'm doing this, 1 day to try to decipher it. At the end of that day, if my spellcraft check is successful, I can copy into my book. It will take me 1 day plus 1 day per level of the spell to copy it from the source into my book. In this case, it is important to note I can copy any level spell into my book, but it's time consuming. If I fail this check, well, I can't do that spell anymore. Until I find a different source than either the spellbook or scroll, I can't try to do that anymore. I have failed to understand this spell enough to copy it into my own writing. I might know what this spell does, I might be able to read what this spell does, but actually getting it into my own version of it for my own material, nope. Now, copying from a spellbook does nothing to it. It's fine, it's okay. But copying from a scroll causes the magic of that particular spell to fade. If that's the only spell on the scroll, scroll's completely useless. If it had 2 or 3 spells, only that spell stops working. Now, failure doesn't do anything to spellbook, just like success doesn't do anything to the spellbook. Failure on the scroll means scroll is also unaffected. The scroll is also fine should I fail to decipher and copy it from the scroll. It's only if I successfully learn and copy the spell from a scroll does the scroll's magic fade. Now, failure doesn't mean that I can't try it with this scroll or spellbook again. Normally, I would have to try a different source. The scroll, so let's say it's a scroll of Fireball. I failed to do this one. I might need another scroll. Or this book having Fireball. Might need another spellbook. But when I gain a rank in Spellcraft, this doesn't say level, this says rank in Spellcraft. Of course, traditionally this is gaining a level, but as soon as my Spellcraft goes up again, I'm allowed to try to decipher this spellbook or scroll again. I've learned enough more that I can attempt these again. Now, here's what I was talking about earlier a little bit, and here's where everything comes together a little bit more. Arcane spells, arcane materials, are written in arcane language, which mazes and other arcane spellcasters learn over the course of their career, into diving and learning about arcane spells. The big inflection here is this arcane writing is written out differently by each arcane mage. Each one of them has their own version of this arcane writing system that they'll be copying down. This doesn't mean we can't, me and a fellow mage couldn't read each other's material. No, not automatically though. It means that we would have to interpret each other's material and begin to understand it and decipher it. Deciphering it requires you to make a spellcraft check DC 20 plus the level of spell in order to decipher what this spell says exactly. If I fail, I can't try again until the next day. The success here means that I've read the spell and I understand what the spell does, its effects and description. This means that if I find a spell within a spellbook that I have no idea what it does, I might want to decipher it to find out what this new and interesting spell does, rather than just try to instantly copy it over to my spellbook. Spellbooks have space usually. You don't want to fill it up too much, so copying it there also takes more time. Deciphering and learning, is this important? That might be important. Now, you can make the deciphering easier though. If you are using the spell Read Magic, you instantly decipher it. The spell itself translates it for you, lets you know what these say, you can understand it without any kind of trouble. Also, the author, the person that created this spellbook or scroll, is right there next to you. They can let you know what it says. Makes it really simple. The big thing here is if I've deciphered a scroll, now if I'm an arcane caster, and this is an arcane scroll, I can cast and use the scroll. That's what I need to do in order to effectively use this scroll, as I have to be able to read it. Once I have deciphered a scroll or a spellbook, I don't have to decipher that same scroll or spellbook ever again. I've managed to figure out what it says. I understand that version of the arcane script in response to that spell. And I can be ready to use it, ready to read it, every time. Now, sometimes a case may come up where you don't have access to your spellbook. You can prepare your arcane spells from another person's spellbook. These have to be spells that you have in your own spellbook and you have the ability to cast. So it's anything that I have copied into my own spellbook and I have the ability to prepare. Alright, so this is not automatically successful. Just because I want to prepare from here, it means that, first off, I have deciphered the spells that I'm casting. So that decipher check that I talked about, which, if you fail, you can only do once a day. That's a big thing about the deciphering. You can repeat that part every day. But I have had to have deciphered the spell I'm going to memorize from this book. Then, once I've deciphered all the different spells from this spell book that I want to cast today, those I failed, of course, I'll have to wait till tomorrow to try to do it again. Or those that I did yesterday, I don't have to do it again. Well, now I have to make a spellcraft check DC 15 plus spell level to actually memorize it. And I do this for each spell I memorize. Each one of them I add to a spell slot that I have. Each one I prepare, including if I repeat the same one. So decipher, and then a second check, slightly less DC, to actually prepare it. If I fail to prepare it, I can't prepare it for today. I'm done with that spell. I'll have to prepare something else. Now, I could prepare something else or the same spell from a different source. So if I'm borrowing my friend over here's spellbook and my friend over here's spellbook, and I fail to decipher and memorize it from here, well, I could use my friend B's spellbook to do the same thing. I have to decipher it, and, if it's the same spell, that might be a way to do it. But it's a check for everyone you memorize, effectively. But that's it for today. So, we finished talking about arcane spells by going over spell books and memorizing and learning spells. Important information that you're going to have to know. In the next episode, we're going to dive into the other type of spells and magic you can use, divine magic, those connected to nature or gods. And hopefully then we'll also dive into talking about what's on the spell list, where you're going to navigate and go through there. But I hope you're having a great day, and until the next time, I bid you farewell.